Hi, welcome to Comic Talk. I'm Josh, and this is Drew. This is our pull list review episode for July 15th. We'll just go ahead and jump right into things. We're going to start off this week with We Stand on Guard, number 1. This came out just a few weeks ago. We had some supplier issues. We got a hold of it, and we read it, and now we're going to review it. This is written by Brian K. Vaughan. The art is by Steve Scroce. Matt Hollingsworth did the coloring here, and the lettering and overall design is by Phonographics. Is Phonographics a person?
I think so. Mr. Phonographics.
He thinks he's pretty cool.
Junior, yeah.
Okay.
And also, it's not listed in this comic, but I have to believe that there were innumerable contributions by not only Bret Hart, but possibly most of the Hart Foundation.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened in We Stand on Guard?
After a young girl's parents are killed in a U.S. invasion of Canada, she, as an adult in the futuristic time of 2124, finds herself banding together with a motley group of Canadian freedom fighters.
Against the U.S.
Against the U.S.
Yeah. So this is the first issue. This is a new Brian K. Vaughan.
This is.
What's your overall impression so far?
This is maybe the least Brian K. Vaughan, at least in my experience, title that I've read. It doesn't remind me of Why the Last Man. It doesn't remind me of Runaway. It doesn't really remind me of like any Brian K. Vaughan that I've read. The tone, I feel, is very different. Would you agree?
I wouldn't agree. That's interesting.
Agree?
I actually wrote down here that I felt like it had a Why the Last Man tone more than anything I think he's done since Why the Last Man.
Maybe the dystopian aspect, definitely. I don't feel that it's as funny or clever or wordplay-y or the things that I normally associate with Brian K. Vaughan writing. You know, that sort of lighthearted pop culture-ness.
I see. I would say that Why the Last Man had that in there a lot, but it sort of started off pretty grounded and with a pretty straight sort of apocalyptic story to start out with. So I felt this had sort of a similar...
But the first scene is him talking about Elvis's twin brother.
Yeah, that's true.
You know,
that's true. But we did have like the Superman discussion in here.
That was the one Brian K. Vaughan like moment that I could definitely tell I was reading Brian K. Vaughan. They had this argument over whether Superman's American or Canadian, which you can understand why it would be important to them.
Right. And I felt like also these sort of strong female characters sort of had a very Why the Last Man feel to me as well, which probably isn't fair. That probably just has more to do with the fact that most other comics fail to deliver on strong female characters than anything really directly related to Why the Last Man. But it did give me, it did make me think of his work in Why the Last Man with
Sure.
Agent 355.
I was just about to say I could see a comparison between the protagonist in this story and Agent 335, 355.
335?
Yeah.
I can never remember numbers, so I don't know.
Yeah, sure. That one.
Sure. Also, I felt like the artwork in here, in general, had sort of that same vibe that Why the Last Man had.
Artwork-wise, I would agree. And really, this is a pretty thick issue.
It is.
I don't know exactly how many pages it is, but it's quite a few. And really, the artwork takes up most of it.
It does.
There are several, I think, pages in a row sometimes, you know, where we don't have any dialogue.
I think there was a lot of pretty dark stuff that happened in here.
Super dark.
Very dark. The whole beginning sequence, I don't want to spoil it too far because it is pretty interesting. It really sets up the rest of the book. But I felt like that was a shock and sort of really pulled me right into it.
And graphic at that. It's very graphic, probably because it's Image, so they could get away with it. But yeah, you definitely feel the trauma of the situation. It's very successful at portraying that.
Yeah, and I feel like they carry that throughout. I think that early trauma that they show really helps sell the stakes later on throughout the rest of the issue.
I wouldn't be surprised if the coming issues weren't a little funnier, what I would consider typical Brian K. Vaughan. I think maybe this served more as a setup to where you really have to understand the severity of the situation before he starts making jokes about it. Because you know, even the plot itself, you know, war between Canada and America, like you just kind of chuckle in your mind
Sure.
as you think about it. And on that note, the reason for America invading Canada that they give in here, some real shit.
Yeah.
That could happen.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't even thought about it. It definitely could.
Yeah. Pretty interesting stuff. What did you think of the sci-fi elements here? Because this is sort of a near future sort of book.
Mm-hmm. I didn't really find them far-fetched or overwhelming or anything. It all seems like very feasible things that we could have well before 2020,
Yeah,
21-24.
There's a lot of sort of allusions towards DARPA.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of the sort of mechanized things that they're coming up against look like a lot of the stuff we see DARPA working on now. But at the same time, it's sort of extrapolated out to be almost Star Wars-esque with the large walking
Yeah, when I saw that,
gorilla beast.
definitely Star Wars was the first thing to come to mind.
Which I'm certainly not complaining. I think that's a pretty cool sort of melding of two interesting things, sort of DARPA and the Empire in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
It's a clever way to sort of pull you into that world of making the U.S. sort of the bad guy in the story.
Right. I do think referencing Star Wars is a bit overdone, maybe, especially at this point. It seems like people quote that more than they quote, like, you know, like the founding pieces of literature.
Sure.
You know.
Sure, but it is still a really easy way to sort of get a...
It's easy.
Yeah, to quickly establish an idea.
One thing, there's a lot of French
Mm-hmm.
in this issue. How did you feel about that?
I liked it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't speak French.
I don't know. Yeah.
Which I kind of liked, having a character who is speaking a foreign language that I don't know, and they don't translate it.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing, is most times in comics, you know, you'll get a little asterisk and then it'll translate for you on the bottom, or at least it'll say translated from whatever to whatever.
Right, or it'll put it inside the like the brackets, and it'll just be in English, but you're supposed to assume that he's speaking another language.
Yeah. There was a lot of it. I initially was kind of annoyed by it just because there was so much, and I felt like I was probably missing important things or things that I would have enjoyed, you know, even if they weren't necessarily, you know, key plot points and stuff like that. I would like to see him rein it back a little bit, personally.
Yeah, because basically what's happening here is there's one character in the story that only speaks French throughout. I think he says a few words of English in sort of the way anyone from Quebec, right? You know, there's a little bit of English thrown in, but he's mostly speaking French the whole way through. So almost once a page, we have a character who has some dialogue in French.
Mm-hmm.
I liked it. I thought it was interesting, and it made me feel a little bit more part of the world, because there is a character who I don't understand that I wouldn't understand in the real world.
That didn't bother you a little bit? You didn't feel like you were missing out on anything by not speaking?
I liked that I felt like I was missing out on what he was saying.
Okay.
I thought it was an interesting sort of way to add some mystery to the story.
So if you like feeling left out, you stand on guard.
Mm-hmm. All right, then that will bring us to our next comic of the week. This is Big Trouble in Little China, number 13. And this is quite the departure. We have a brand new creative team.
Mm-hmm.
This is Fred Van Lint is now the writer. Joe Eisma is doing the art. Gonzalo Duarte doing the coloring. And Ed Dukeshire doing the lettering.
It's an unfortunate last name.
Dukeshire.
Yeah, the Shire of the Duke.
I like Dukeshire.
Yeah.
How dare you?
It depends on what kind of Duke you're talking about, I guess.
So give us a quick synopsis here of Big Trouble in Little China this week.
Well, after having his body preserved indefinitely in 1986, Jack Burton wakes up in 2015 with only one goal in mind: finding his goddamn truck.
So with that amazing description, what did you think of this?
I was really worried up till like exactly the halfway point. Like, you know, where you see the staples usually. The artwork is so different. I hadn't decided yet whether or not the humor was going to keep me on the same page. There were little hints of it. Nothing really made me laugh. And then bam, like you hit that halfway point and it suddenly became hilarious.
Really?
Yeah, the tiger joke that they used throughout the issue, which I won't divulge, honestly, but it just got weirder and more funny, and like the more times it came up.
I was on the opposite side.
Really?
On this one. I really felt very let down with this. I was kind of bummed out with it, to be honest. I felt like the writing was much more sophomoric. The art, like you said, it's a departure. It feels now like, to me, it feels like sort of a low effort DC book.
I can see that.
Jack no longer really has his personality artistically, like the way he's portrayed on the page. He's lost his chin. He looks younger than us now. I didn't really enjoy this book.
It's not anywhere near as clever as it was before, which I think is the biggest thing that kind of bothered me. Visually and, like, you know, regarding dialogue and stuff. It's just, it doesn't have the same
pizzazz.
Yeah,
it doesn't have the same character. I felt the recurring joke with the robot, I felt like it was sort of an apt metaphor for this new direction. Just a robot saying the same tired joke repeatedly without really any thought to the delivery. I didn't.
That's pretty hard.
Yeah, I really do. I feel like that was one of the big jokes of the book, and it totally fits with the way this is being written now. I don't have a whole lot to say about it. I was pretty harshly disappointed with it.
I did like when they're talking about everything that happened with, like, the franchising and such after he disappeared or died temporarily or whatever. There was a couple funny moments. They show him a poster of the Big Trouble in Little China movie,
Right, the
and
actual movie, and Snake Plissken.
And he got Snake Plissken to play me.
Yeah, I think that was probably the high point for me. There was a few panels in there that I enjoyed when they sort of went meta with it. I thought that was clever.
Also the book, Big Trouble in Little Calgary.
And she was working on Big Trouble in Little Odessa, I believe.
Odessa, which, to my knowledge, isn't that just a shitty little Texas town?
Yeah.
And I think that area is the part that really, like, turned it around for me. After I read, you know, that bit, it was like, okay, well, I'm having fun again. It's not as depressing as the first half.
Yeah, you have to admit the first half was pretty depressing.
Yeah, I was not happy at all.
Yeah, they saved it from being terrible in the back half, but I wasn't impressed. I wasn't sold on it, really. Sometimes it takes some time to get in, you know, your feet under you, especially with something that had this much of a recognizable tone to it. You know, because you can't just keep aping the other people's tone. You can't just keep doing what they were doing. It's cheap and easier maybe than striking out on your own.
Right.
So in a way, maybe they made a bold choice on trying to sort of give it their own feel and look. I wasn't buying the comedy or the characters. I didn't feel that we were even in the same universe.
Really, the only thing that was a consistent letdown for me was the artwork. Because I really like the artwork in the first 12 issues.
Yeah,
and it's
too.
not because they were overly detailed or anything. It's just because it was fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
You know? Such as this feels more standard fare.
Yeah, this art is just there to serve the writing, whereas the art before was there to be funny on its own.
Yeah. And make his chin bigger, which now it's smaller, which is bullshit.
Yeah, he's got a little pointy chin now.
Yeah,
What's
the
that?
hell? Have you seen Kurt Russell ever?
Yeah, it's Kurt Russell.
Kurt Russell Mania. WrestleMania?
Kurt Russellmania.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That was so good I didn't even get it. Well, that leaves us with one more. This was a short week for us.
Yeah.
A light one, I guess you could say. So our last book is Hail Hydra #1. This is the new Rick Remender title, the writer on this. It's art by Roland Boschi or Bosky?
Boschi.
Boschi?
I think it's right. Yeah.
Do you just like Boschi better?
Yeah, I like it better.
Okay. That's what we're going with. Somebody, does he have a Twitter? Let him know.
I don't know.
We'll check. Chris Chukri is on color.
Cheshire.
Cheshire. Chris Cheshire. And apparently VC's Clayton Cowles did the lettering and layout and design here.
So after Nomad, the son of Zola and adopted son of Steve Rogers avoids his own death by hiding in the Infinite Elevator? The Infinite Elevator. He finds himself in a version of New York not only run by Hydra, but apparently founded by Hydra.
What did you think of this overall?
I kind of thought it was going to be funny. It's not.
It's not funny. It's pretty dystopian.
Yes, dystopian is a fantastic word for it. And it's also very very narration heavy in a personal kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
His thoughts comprise most of the words on most of the pages, which I thought was awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
I'm always a huge advocate of that writing style. You know, the Scott Snyder Batman that everybody hates on for being 90% in his head. Totally my thing, and this falls under that category.
Yeah, it's very introspective writing.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I liked it quite a bit. I'm not blown away by it, but I do really like the setup that we have here. I think it could be an interesting story to follow.
Yeah, it has a lot of potential.
Mm-hmm.
This is another one that it is Marvel, so I mean it's not, they don't have as much freedom as the Image writers, but this one was pretty dark as well.
It was.
This is not the Hydra that we see portrayed in the Marvel Cinematic Universe by any means.
No.
You know, kind of like these lighthearted Nazis somehow, I guess is what they were going for, but this is like some real deal, like dystopian
Bootjack.
fascism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jackboot.
Jackboot.
Bootjack, Jackboot. You know, same difference. So overall, I thought that this was pretty interesting from a writing perspective.
Mm-hmm.
From an artwork perspective,
Not really.
not really that interesting. Pretty standard fare. The artist here, Mr. Boshi, he does a good job of telling the story and sort of setting the dark tone.
Mm-hmm.
But there's nothing happening here that really had me excited from an artistic perspective.
And it's strange because on one hand, I could see if Marvel is going for this branding thing by making all of their comics look the same. But then we have Weird World.
Right, which is just gorgeous and,
Right.
and sort of out there.
So I don't understand really what they're going for. I don't know if there's just a sudden influx in writers that don't have anything particularly interesting to say in manner of speaking or what the deal is, but I mean, if you took a panel out of this and told me that it was from Runaways, I'd believe you.
Right. That can't be avoided with large publishers, I suppose. You know, we're just
But
gonna...
again, we have Weird World.
We do have Weird World. We have exceptions. We have the Scotty Young stuff. We have even Old Man Logan has a pretty unique look to it.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
so Marvel, it's not like Marvel just has one style that we're seeing it, but this is definitely, if there is a Marvel style, it's this. What do you think of these characters? Are you interested in the characters that we're seeing, or do you find Nomad or Ian Rogers interesting?
On the surface level, no. But I think that really goes back to just fanboyisms. You know, on paper, I don't really care about Captain America or, you know, his stable of villains or whoever. But beneath that, it is sort of an interesting setup for a character, you know, because he has this father that's this absolute evil tyrant menace guy, and then his adopted dad is Captain America,
Right.
you know, who's trying to instill all these core values and stuff in him. I think it was a clever move on their part to sort of introduce this character as the next Captain America, being that he has a lot more inner turmoil to speak of. There's a lot more that can kind of go sideways with this one than the last one, who was just, you know, an undersized guy like myself who got more steroids than he knew what to do with, which I should track down for myself.
I'm not so sure that Ian here is going to, or Nomad, or whatever you want to call him, I'm not so sure that they're setting him up as Captain America either right now.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think so. Sam, whatever his last name is, the Falcon, the black guy from the Captain America movie, that's Captain America right now.
Okay.
And he even mentions him at some point, or it may have just been in the synopsis at the front that explains things, that explain that he's his sidekick in a way. He's sort of the Bucky of the new Captain America, which there is, here in a couple months, there's that new Captain America book coming out where we see Steve Rogers and Sam, whatever his last name is, both as Captain America at the same time, and that's the big thing. And I think it might even be a Remender book. I'm not so sure that's what they're setting up here, but he's definitely got sort of a Captain America feel to him. Obviously, it's supposed to feel like Captain America, but not. So I get what you're saying. In a way, regardless of if they call him that or not, he's supposed to be sort of the next Captain America.
Right.
And we also see a reveal that we're not going to spoil here that sort of
That's
pushes towards what you're saying.
That's what really made me think of it, is just the portrayal of our mystery character. It almost seems like they have to be planning towards that, or they're complete idiots.
Right. Yeah, it could be. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that I'm not
as of
so
now,
sure
I'm not correct.
Right. As of yet, there's probably a lot of time between this and that. And we have seen Nomad, the character, especially back in the 90s, play around with being Captain America as well, and whether or not he wanted to take up those reins or not. Mm-hmm. So this isn't territory that's never been tread either, so you're not that far off base. Overall, I felt like the character of Nomad is sort of a blank slate in a way, because he sort of has both sides and he's got to try to decide between them. So they have a lot of interesting room here to sort of play around with character development, which is
definitely,
I think, what attracts me to this book the most and makes me want to keep reading it. Because it's hard to say which direction he's going to go, who he's going to become, and what he's going to do.
That's the thing. The big allure for me at this point is hoping that our good guy just goes tunneling down into some really dark shit for probably like a year's worth of issues before he comes out. That's best case scenario in my mind.
And I'd love to see him just tear through these Hydra people just brutally and really go to some dark places and question his motives and if he's doing the right thing, which kind of seems to me like is precisely what they're setting up.
I'd love to see him take over Hydra and make a fucking worse Hydra.
That'd be cool.
Like when Daredevil became the new Kingpin for a while.
Yeah. So do you think this is going to go dark and he's going to be sort of an anti-hero?
I hope so.
I do too.
I hope he comes out on the other side a tweener at best.
All right, well, I think that pretty much wraps up this episode for today. Check back Friday, which should basically be tomorrow. We have Saga of the Swamp Thing, review of the Alan Moore Volume 1. That's from the early 80s. We had quite the discussion on it, so check that out. And come back to us next Wednesday when we do another pull list review. Other than that, just push all the buttons down below. Tell us some things that you think. If you read any of these comics, let us know what you think about them. And if we find it interesting, maybe we'll talk about it next week. Like, subscribe, all those things, and we'll see you soon.
Escalator!